How scary is the rabies virus? If a person is infected, if they are not vaccinated in time, the virus in the body travels to the brain at a rate of 20 millimeters per day. Once the virus has entered the brain, it will completely control human behavior. You will become disoriented, afraid of light, afraid of water, hallucinations and psychosis, constant convulsions, and then you die. The human infection is terrible. What about animals? This 1983 film will give you the answer. The film begins. A lively Saint Bernard is chasing a rabbit through the grass. The rabbit runs through a dead tree. In the blink of an eye, it burrows into a dark hole. Behind him, the dog in hot pursuit, poking his head into the hole, barking furiously at the rabbit. Unbeknownst to the dog, the barking irritated the hanging bats. The bats flew all over the place, and one of them gave the dog a snort. The puppy yelped in pain. Just because of that bite. In the future, a naive puppy will turn evil. Back home, it became sensitive and resistant to the sounds around it, preferring to stay in the dark. That day, his owner took him to the neighbor's house. The neighbor had a big grin, constantly making clattering noises. This made Raffles uncomfortable. The next moment, the neighbor started again. This sudden noise disturbed Raffles. Soon he was startled again by the sound of his owner's applause. Again and again, he was one step closer to losing control. The next day, the fog was thick. Raffles was nowhere to be seen. The master went out to look for him, but the fog obscured his vision. He couldn't find him, but just as it turned, Raffles appeared, but the eyes had become strange. The master called his name, but to no avail. The owner tried to stroke the dog's head, but it was no use. Fortunately, listening to his master's worried call, Raffles regained his senses in time. He walked slowly into the mist and disappeared. But the neighbor who had annoyed him wasn't so lucky. That's right, he was targeted by Raffles. The neighbor ran back frantically, but he still fell. Raffles took the opportunity to jump on him and bite him. The man got away in time and cursed him. Seeing Raffles, the man frowned. The man ran into the house and tried to finish him off with his shotgun. But before he could load it, Raffles broke through the door. It pounced. The neighbor fell to the floor. Raffles took the opportunity to bite even harder. In a few moments, the neighbor died. On the other side, the master searched everywhere for Raffles. He finally arrived at the neighbor's house. He was greeted by a cold corpse. He was so frightened that he called the police. At that very moment, Raffles rushed out. The owner was horrified to see the once docile puppy. He left a note. "My God, this dog is crazy." And then he claimed his kennel. The same day, a mother and son drove up, but just as they were passing, the car broke down and stopped. What they didn't know, that death had come for them. The woman was unbuckling her son's seatbelt. Suddenly, a rabid dog lunged at her. Minna tried to roll up the car window, but the dog didn't give her a chance. It kept trying to get into the car. Luckily, she managed to close the window at the last minute. Then the dog turned to the other side, pawing at the window. "There's no way in here either." Then the front. Raffles jumps on the bonnet, paws at the windscreen. Minna sees it. She honks to scare Raffles away, but it works. Raffles runs away, but it didn't go far. He watched her from a distance. After a while, Minna, urged on by her son, tried to start the car. Miraculously, the car started, but it didn't last long. The car only managed the steps. Then the battery died. The despair that followed hope left Minna devastated. There was nothing she could do. All she could do was stay in the car and wait for help, and Raffles was not far away. During the night, the son wakes Minna and says he needs to pee. He crouches under the front of the car. He sees the door open. Raffles is ready to jump in, but just then the house phone rings. Raffles is excited. He jumped at the door and barked. He even broke the glass to get in. Luckily, the doorbell rang just in time. Raffles' out-of-control behavior stopped. He stayed on the stairs watching Minna. Nothing happened overnight. Minna wakes up from the car, but when she turns her head, she sees Raffles staring at her with a pus-filled face. There was nothing Minna could do. The temperature was 40 degrees. The car was like an oven. Minna wanted to rush inside with her son. Then she looked at the dog not far away. She weighed the pros and cons. But just as she entered the house, the phone rang again. Raffles couldn't stand the sound. He ran out of control towards Minna and slammed into the car door. Then it reversed again and kept going. The child screamed in terror, but the screams irritated Raffles even more. He came to the other side of the car. A claw broke the glass. He bit off the door handle. Then he jumped on top of the car and pulled hard. Minna covered the child's mouth. That's when Raffles calmed down a little. After a while, a new problem arose. The child was naked and sweating profusely. It was a sign of heat stroke. Mayana had no choice but to get out of the car and look for a way out. She slammed her body against the twisted car door. Silently she stepped out. Little did she know that Raffles had seen her move under the car. The woman cautiously got out of the car. She looked around in horror. Then she slowly bent down to look into the car. But just then, a dog covered in blood appeared behind her. It didn't even think twice. It pounced on Minna and tore at her like crazy. Minna screamed in agony and struggled desperately. She threw herself away from Raffles and opened the door of the car, but Raffles got in right behind her. He continued to bite Minna. The child curled up in the back seat, screaming. She doesn't realize that the louder she gets, the more excited the dog gets. It bites Minna's thigh. She tried to pull Minna out of the car, but Minna clings to the seat. Raffles only pulled out one of her skirts. Minna closed the car door. That's all. Minna was badly hurt, but she had to be strong for her baby. Time flies. Mother and child were trapped in the car for 48 hours. As soon as she opened her eyes, she realized that something was wrong with the baby. She tried to carry him inside, but as soon as she opened the car door, Raffles approached. Minna had to stop. She put her fingers to the baby's throat. That's how she got her son to breathe. Shortly after that, a police car came, but Minna and the baby were asleep and didn't notice. The policeman looked at the bloody police car. He felt something was wrong, so he stopped. He wanted to ask someone. Suddenly a rabid dog came out. It knocked the gun out of his hand. Minna was woken up by the noise outside the car. The policeman was pushed into the shed. He escaped up to the rafters, but in the face of Raffles' desperate attack, he lost his center of gravity and fell to the ground. Minna saw this and tried to help him, but Raffles lunged at her again. She had no choice but to retreat back to the car. She watched as the policeman died in the dog's mouth. The sunlight flooded the car. Inside the car, mother and child are in a terrible state. Minna tries to wake the baby, but she realizes that the child has fainted from dehydration. There is no way out. Mayana has to get out of the car. She must get water to save the child's life, but Raffles is blocking her way. This time, Minna didn't give in. She picked up the stick on the ground and confronted Raffles. Minna swung the stick at the dog's head, but it didn't seem to have any effect on Raffles. He came at Minna again. Minna swung hard. The stick breaks in two. The situation is becoming increasingly critical, but she stumbles over a branch. Raffles jumps on her. He is stabbed in the stomach by the broken bat, and that was the end of the disaster. Minna rushed into the house with the child in her arms. After giving the child a few sips of water, she finally revives him.